So let me tell you a story that you've never heard before. So off in a faraway land, two armies come to meet each other at battle. Upon meeting each other at battle, not wanting to sacrifice life of large quantities of men, a champion walks out from the opposing force, a tall giant of a man, wearing armor and carrying a big club. On the other side, while the army is sitting there fearful of facing such a challenge, a young boy, no more the youngest of his brothers, takes upon the challenge. He's offered the armor of his king, his father, but he chooses not to. And he goes out and he fights this giant. And through divine intervention, he is able to defeat the giant and then take his chariot and rode off into victory. This young man would later become the king. And after becoming the king, he would become the wisest man in all of Greece, because you thought this was about David and Goliath. I know you were sitting there thinking that this was the David and Goliath story, but in all actuality, this was the story of Nestor. Nestor, as written, chronicled by Homer in the Iliad and the Odyssey, primarily in the Iliad, is a story that was written in the 10th century BCE, a full 300 years prior to the story of David ever being written. But according to Homer in this story, the legendary King Nestor, who is no proof actually existed, was the son of King Nilus. And in being the son of King Nilus, when the two armies came to meet in normal fashion of Greek combat, oftentimes a champion is chosen to represent the whole of the army to save lives. In this instance, a champion was chosen, and he was a giant of a man from the opposing forces. The kingdom of Pylos, which is the kingdom that King Nilus and that Nestor comes from, they were fearful. But the youngest son, who was simply there to bring and carry things for his family, he decided to take on the challenge. His father offered him his armor, but he felt the armor was too big and it wasn't something that he was accustomed to fighting in. So he goes out into battle, and through divine intervention from the gods, he is able to defeat the giant. And after defeating the giant, he hops on the giant's chariot and rides off back into his army, and then they charge after the enemy's army and defeats them all. And later on, he becomes the king of Pylos. And after becoming the king of Pylos, he becomes a wise general, a wise king, the one that soldiers to the levels of Achilles comes and asks questions of. He settles the issue between Achilles and Agamemnon before they go into the Battle of Troy. He counsels Agamemnon, and he also counsels Jason and the Argonauts. He becomes the wisest man in the world. I know when you listen to this story, you think, oh, well, they're copying from the David and Goliath story and also throwing a little Solomon in there. But the truth be told, the David and Goliath story is not ever told or written until the 7th century BCE, which puts it in the 600s. This story of Nestor was told and written in the 900s BCE. So there is clearly a 400-year difference between the two stories. And it is quite literally possible and most likely that the story of David defeating Goliath, and as we see so many similarities within the story, a young shepherd boy comes up and finds out that his countrymen are fearful of this giant wearing armor that is eerily the type of armor that in the 6th century BCE the Greeks wore, is touting out for there to be single combat, which eerily is something that was known from the Greeks. And David, the youngest of the brothers, goes out and fight. Now, Nestor was next to the youngest. They go out and fight. Through divine intervention, both prevail over the giant. Through divine intervention, afterwards, they chase and destroy the rest of the army. Subtle differences. Saul is the father figure like person who offers his armor and then is denied that armor, whereas in this case, it's Nestor's own father. Slight differences. Goliath's head is completely chopped off at the end, while Nestor takes the chariot of the giant. Very slight differences, only to make it fit into the narrative of a new author, as many copies are done, have done. They make subtle changes. So then the question would be, if the David and Goliath story is not a true story, why was this story written? For a clearer understanding of that, you got to know about this guy, King Josiah. Now, King Josiah is a historical person who was the ruler of Judea in and around 640 to 609 BCE. It is said that King Josiah found a scroll, and possibly the scroll might have been an ancient Deuteronomy scroll that was found during the restoration of a temple. And then he began to commit to a lot of religious reforms. He is the one who got rid of Asherah, the wife of El. He is the one who decided that Jerusalem, well, he continued the idea, but reinforced the idea of Jerusalem being the only place of worship, because all the Assyrians had destroyed all the other cities and towns and all the other places of worship. So he reconciled everything to be in Jerusalem. Now, the other and the main reason, now the most important reason, was to create for himself an ancient history of royalty of bloodline. As you can see on this genealogy map, according to the Bible, the bloodline of Josiah stems all the way up to the Judah. In between there, what do you have? You have David, you have Solomon. These were believed to have been kings that ruled over Israel at a unified time frame. Yet there is no evidence of a unified Israel. But after finding whatever scrolls he found, this narrative came into being that David took over from Saul. Saul's line stemming from Benjamin, and Saul was found to not be a good king, not be worthy of kingship, since he didn't go out and fight this battle, but David being found worthy of kingship. We're going to discuss this and more tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on our live on Facebook and YouTube at Coach Renz 33. I would like you guys to join me there. And one of the things we're also going to talk about is the fact that there is a misunderstanding of this David and Goliath story. When you actually nail it down and look at the story, you'll find out that David fighting Goliath was like a young Mike Tyson fighting a well-aged, over-the-hill Muhammad Ali, a man that in his youth was unstoppable, but now is at an age where a young, ferocious Mike Tyson would utterly destroy him. Yes, that is the true story of David and Goliath that we will discuss tonight. So I look forward to seeing you guys there. And always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.